Balloons.
Baloney.
Balloons.
Party balloons, clown balloons.
Yeah, that's what I said to somebody on Twitter. Some
serious person.
Some U.S. intelligence official type person who said
Very serious.
who was complaining about the balloon. And I said, actually, it was Blinken.
No less. Yeah.
He was saying he was complaining about the balloon, and I said, "But what's wrong, Anthony? Clowns love balloons. Why are you hating on the balloon? You should love it." Yeah, it's one of those things that pops up and you'd never expect it to pop up, like just in the broad strokes, you know. A balloon making people go crazy. And actually, the balloon is like at least in Ireland, balloon, at least where I come from in Ireland, you can call someone a balloon, you know, when they're being stupid. Shut up, you balloon, will you? Because they're being stupid, you know. So, yeah, it's appropriate for a bunch of balloons. Huh?
I was hardly keeping up with the news midweek, and then people were asking me, "Did you hear about the balloon?" And I said, "The what?" Mm-hmm. What's happened now? But it's the dominant trending story for 5 consecutive days.
Wow, people don't have a lot to kind of entertain them. You
know,
well,
that's what I'm worried about. Are they that bored?
Yeah.
Well, are things that good for people that this is the story?
Mm-hmm. They've got nothing else to worry about, apparently. It's interesting.
It's come to a denouement today, just now. A few hours ago, US F-22 shot down said Chinese balloon with a Sidewinder missile.
Yeah. With an inert Sidewinder missile, obviously.
Right. It didn't explode. It just pierced it.
Yeah, because, I mean, that would have been I was thinking that they would do that if they were going to shoot it down. They would, you know, you don't want to blow it up because you want to, ideally, just for out of curiosity, you want to get access to the actual, you know, it had a panel underneath it with some solar panels and probably a camera in the middle. Who knows what was, but not a lot of stuff, obviously. This is a picture of the pretty good video of the actual shoot down. Look at that balloon. It's lovely.
Apparently it's a big boy. So a weather balloon is usually about a third of the size. Even at that high altitude, they will inflate when they're high up.
Yeah, and continue to
pressure. Yeah. But this one was still a big boy, like 3 buses long.
Yeah, if you play it again there,
in width.
Yeah.
I have it also.
You can see it doesn't
from
explode.
The ground.
You can see the missile actually goes through. You see it actually goes through the balloon. There's no explosion. Close to the bottom of it, but enough that you can see there the
payload just drops.
Actual, the panel underneath kind of drops down.
The payload. There I am
payload.
using
Well,
US
yeah,
military
look, you
talk,
see that
assuming it's a bomb.
You see that cloud at the end there? That was COVID.
Well, we're joking, but this
It took off from Wuhan, loaded with COVID, and it was, it was a biological attack against America. That's all I can say. I
But
mean, that seems to be this
to
is
show people where we got that idea from.
State Department. Actually, I think this guy is actually from the State Department. I don't know who he is exactly, but he. No, he's not from the State Department. Actually,
Tired.
it's on the. He's some dude. Have a listen to what he thinks.
That is the size of 3 buses now that China says was taken by wind that we can't substantiate.
Well, I'm concerned this is going to be another example of the Biden administration's weakness on the national scale. I mean, you look at what happened in Afghanistan. That hurt the reputation of America's military strength. That hurt the reputation of our commander-in-chief. And now we have China clearly playing games with the United States. This balloon never should have been allowed to cross over into past the Pacific coast under the continental United States. Never should have happened. My concern is that the federal government obviously doesn't know what's in that balloon. Is that bioweapons in that balloon? Did that balloon take off from Wuhan? We don't know anything about that balloon. But
that could be a Wuhan balloon.
He's right, though. It could have been.
Well, yeah, of course. Although I do think the DOD or whoever is in control of those things needs to figure out how to start substantiating the wind.
Yeah.
Fact check the wind to see if it was actually doing what it was meant to be doing, or what the Chinese say the wind was doing. We can go back to our models maybe and see if the wind was doing what the Chinese say the wind was doing. But I
presume she meant to say substantiate the claim that the winds drove it off course, as opposed to it being directed. You explained to me before that you can direct somewhat a balloon because by inflating or deflating it remotely, it will enter a different stream of wind that takes it sort of left, straight, or right.
I think I don't know for sure, but I assume if you look at the pictures of it, it's just a balloon. It's just a balloon, Neil, for God's sake, with 4 wires attached to the bottom of it, around the opening that hold the panel underneath it. And maybe if that's mechanized in a basic way, it can close or open the opening basically to allow more to because I'm pretty sure it was a. Let me look at the video again. Where's the video again? I have a picture here actually. Well, that's the blowy up part. Oh no, it didn't have a hole at the bottom, did it?
I didn't study that closely.
No, you should need to study these things closely
for the details.
It may have a hole at the bottom. It's hard to know, But anyway, I suppose there may be some vents in it or something like that. But obviously, you can't vent it too much because it's full of hydrogen. I suppose that helium, hydrogen or helium that allows it to go, float off. I don't know what the mechanism exactly are, but supposedly they can you can't direct it, but you can increase or reduce it. Some of them you can increase or reduce their altitude just to catch different wind streams to put it in different directions. But yeah,
I have video of it from the ground.
Yeah,
it's interesting more for social commentary than a technical close-up of what happened.
Oh, that one,
yeah. So thousands of these things are released every day, but usually they don't go so high, and therefore they don't travel long distances.
Well,
you have the sound.
Come on. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh, look, boys. Oh, got it! He got it! Oh, got it! Let's go!
Thank God we're saved!
There's more.
America! America! Fuck yeah! USA! Thank God! A dangerous balloon was coming to take our freedom.
We got it.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah, well, that's our tax dollars up there. Shooting that whatever it was, Sidewinder, or Hellfire, whatever it was. Anyway, like I said, it wasn't even.
Apparently, it was a huge operation. It wasn't just one F-22. There were 4 other aircraft and 2 ships.
Well, the 2 ships are to pick up the debris, supposedly. Right. Yeah, so it's kind of it's interesting though. The whole thing's kind of interesting as to where it came from. And
do you think the Chinese? Do you think it would be fair to put it in the class of spy balloon than weather balloon? So military rather than civilian.
Yeah, well, like you said, there's like weather balloons go up all the time, multiple times,
and
a day, but they're not. They're not like that one. Because weather balloons are more elongated and stuff, and they tend to just go straight up, and they're up there for a relatively short period of time. And they measure, wind speeds, whatever. They get data basically on very basic communications, whatever, very basic reading instruments to read various parameters of weather. There's other research balloons and stuff like that as well that are a bit bigger and more complex. This would fall into the category of a research balloon, which is what the Chinese said it was, a research balloon. Mostly meteorological research. And yeah, it's strange. I mean, I can understand where the Americans are coming from. Because, it came in over Alaska and then came down across Canada, and nobody said a word. Because nobody cares about Canada. Poor Canada. They got terrorized by a fucking balloon. You know what I mean? For probably a day or 2 days. Nobody said a word. Anything could have happened to Canada with that balloon. It was like, screw Canada. But as soon as it hits America, it's like, holy shit, we've got a balloon.
Montana near nuclear silos.
Near nuclear silos, but
yeah, 700 kilometers close.
Yeah, and maybe you could get different angles from the balloon that they couldn't get from satellites to look at the outside of a nuclear silo, and then plan some. First strike
scheme,
nuclear first strike to take down America or something. Yeah, but no, obviously it's not that. It's not. There's a couple of things. It could be, I suppose, that you have to consider if you try and look at it kind of objectively. First of all, it is what the Chinese said was, right? It's a research balloon. In fact, the Americans, within the first few days of this business, they pretty much admitted, that's what it was. The Pentagon themselves, that was their opinion. This doesn't look like anything special.
Worry about.
It looks like.
And their actions showed that because they waited until it left out over the Atlantic Ocean to shoot it.
Right. So
there's no urgency.
Yeah. Let me just see here. I got a thingy from. Yeah, this is it here. Where'd it go? There it is. Just stick this up. It's from the WAPO, I think. Yeah. It's a screenshot from the WAPO, Washington Post. Oh, sorry, sent it to myself. It's telling me. Where they basically say, yeah, this is kind of nothing burger. The Pentagon said, quoting the Pentagon itself, said that the payload wouldn't offer much in the way of surveillance that China couldn't collect through spy satellites, and that the balloon posed no serious physical or intelligence threat. And this is then in the Washington Post. Experts in national security and aerospace said the craft appears to share characteristics with high-altitude balloons used by developed countries around the world for weather forecasting, telecommunications, and scientific research. And again, the payload wouldn't offer much in the way of surveillance that China couldn't collect through satellites, and pose no serious physical or intelligence threat, according to the Pentagon. So, contrast that with the video we just saw of people screaming USA, USA, and there's another one where someone in maybe that video or another video where they're on the ground and they're shouting, "Yeah, that's my Air Force right there." You know, why did it get turned into some kind of jingoistic, event? You know what I mean?
If that was their true and initial assessment, backed up by the actions, because they didn't shoot it down till day 6 over the Atlantic, then everything that happened in between was probably domestic politics. It was the Republicans using the opportunity to pile on Biden for being weak on communism. Biden then having to go, "Oh, I'll show you who's tough."
Right.
And ordering it to be shot down last Wednesday. With the caveat that General Milley said, "Well, we'll just wait till it goes over the ocean," because the Pentagon had earlier assessed that it poses no threat to national security.
Exactly, yeah.
So it was, what we saw was another spasm, a microspasm of Russiagate. Russiagate was 4 years of internal US politics, in fact, internal DC politics projected outwards onto the globe, onto Russia. Everyone gets to hear about it. And this Chinese spy balloon was the same thing. It's the internal conflict.
Right. Yes.
MAGA Congress versus Biden plus deep state.
Yeah. But that suggests that, that expands it out to the possibility that, I don't know how this would happen, but it expands it out to the possibility. Okay, you're saying that it was capitalized on, that was instrumentalized by the anti-China, cabal, or the anti-China grouping in the US and in Congress, and deep state, Washington establishment, whatever, intelligences who wanted to turn this into something that it didn't need to be, because they wanted to continue the anti-China rhetoric, or up the anti-China rhetoric, basically. And it comes a day before it was, it was in the news one day before. I think this weekend on Friday or something, he was meant to, Blinken was meant to go to Beijing for chats with, he was supposedly going to meet President Xi for, do some kind of deals or whatever, or talk about sanctioning Russia, or maybe deals to sanction, all that stuff, basically. US-Chinese relations basically were on the table, and then that got derailed because Biden or Blinken couldn't, out of, in all decency and all true blue Americanism, go to China after they had flagrantly and recklessly and dangerously violated American space with a balloon. And, it put them in a bind in a certain sense. You can see how they would have seen this research balloon as something that happens fairly regularly. In fact, it's something that happened once already in the Biden administration, maybe 3 times during Trump's administration. Similar balloons were
Chinese balloons.
Yeah, were spotted above, were observed above U.S. territory. None of them lasted as long as this one.
Well then,
but
Trump's a chicken, obviously.
Well, yeah, no, but it's obviously it wasn't an issue before.
Right.
It was never an issue before. And the only difference being that this one tended to linger longer, and which gives credence to the Chinese claim that this was just force majeure. Basically, it was
an accident.
An act of God, basically. It was the act of the wind. That unsubstantiated wind was to blame, and we had no control over it. So what do you make a big deal about it? And the Chinese have said that at the time. Said, listen, chill out. You should deal with this in a respectable, kind of like calm way. You know what I mean? Don't be freaking out about it. And since they shot it down, the Chinese have said, that that was a bit much, and you should, we reserve right to take any actions in response, specifically relating to the company that released the balloon and its rights. You just shot down a private company's research balloon for no good reason.
But Fox News told me it was a Chinese communist balloon.
Well, it is communist,
sent up by the government.
Well,
how can it be a private company in China?
That's the thing.
Absurd.
But it extends the possibilities to, in addition to American anti-Chinese faction within the American government, hyping the whole situation and creating negative optics around it, anti-Chinese optics around the whole thing, to the similarly anti-American faction within China, not not controlled or not even necessarily known about or controlled anyway by Xi, by the Chinese Communist Party, who decided to launch this balloon and
provoke something,
manipulate it in such a way that they would provoke the situation in order to ramp up and this is in advance of some kind of a possible detente between US and China coming up. So you had in that scenario, it would have been initiated by the Chinese quote unquote deep state, or someone within China, some group within China that wants to turn the screw on or downgrade Chinese-American relations, and wants to encourage a confrontation that a lot of people have been talking about recently, possibly in the near future, over Taiwan. And of course, this also comes hot on the heels of the Americans signing a lot of different agreements and making a lot of different maneuvers within East Asia and the Philippines, and where else was it? I can't remember. A couple of other countries basically around China, but obviously in South Korea there, and in Taiwan as well. And even your man, what do you call him, McCarthy, talking about possibly going. There's mention of him possibly going to Taiwan soon. To basically doing the same thing that his predecessor Nancy Pelosi did, was to go to Taiwan and big up Taiwan's democracy and independence. So the US China has for years. The ironic thing about this, or the hypocritical thing about this, is that for years China has been complaining about US spying activity around its borders, basically through flights close to its borders and naval movements close to its borders with spy ships. So America has been spying on directly, flagrantly on China, albeit not via balloon over the country, for a long time. The Chinese have repeatedly, if you look at the news, you can look back over the news and you can find out that the Chinese have repeatedly complained about American spying on Chinese, gathering data, etc. So for them to make a big deal about this balloon is ridiculous. But I like the idea that it was some grouping within the Chinese government, or the Chinese, like I said, quote unquote,
military, private sector,
whoever decided just to stick it to the Americans to say, what are you going to do, and make them look foolish in the process.
Yeah.
Give them a difficult choice. They either let it go and look bad, let it float over the country and look bad by not doing anything about it, or they look equally bad in a more hysterical, ridiculous way for shooting down a goddamn balloon that they themselves said posed no threat, was probably not engaged in any spying activity, and was probably just a research balloon. So why would you shoot it down? You look like a belligerent, trigger happy, aggressive country who can't tolerate a balloon flying over your country. So
right.
it put them in a difficult. Certainly, whether it was done by someone or not done by someone, it put them in a difficult position.
Yeah,
and
it happened organically, naturally, force majeure, or intentionally. Right. And this another story backs sort of because of the contrast in the second balloon that went up. Supports that. From Newsweek, 2nd of the 4th of 3 days ago, photos appear to show a second Chinese balloon passing over Latin America. And the Pentagon agreed. Inside this short article, Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder said reports showed a balloon transiting Latin America, confirming last night that it was another Chinese surveillance balloon. We now assess it is exactly that, a surveillance balloon from China.
So why aren't
see? Oh, shame, it's not showing up.
Click on view.
Cartagena, Colombia. So we're seen in Costa Rica, then down to Colombia, and then Venezuela at last.
So why aren't they freaking out about
it? They're
because they're used to it, or it's no big deal.
Someone in their military said, "Hang on, I'll find it now." Someone in the Colombian military says, "This is of no concern to us." Where is it now? There it is. Oh no, I can't find it. I read it earlier. Yeah, Colombia was basically like, "Yeah, no, it's not a threat. We're just going to let it sail on by."
Right, which they do regularly, well, fairly regularly.
But that's interesting, though. If that is true, there were two of them.
Yeah. But there's probably others
Right.
right now. But that's what people don't understand.
Yeah.
This is a farce. Like,
Yeah.
it's like it's almost literally like
the US is making an issue out of it.
And it's not making an issue out of it, and out of nothing, basically, in the sense of these kind of things. Like I said, there were similar, probably very similar type balloons, maybe even identical balloons, once already since Biden became president, over U.S. territory, over parts of the U.S., and 3 under Trump. Do you remember hearing anything about them?
No.
And then obviously Latin America, because that's close enough, right? Latin America is America's backyard, right? May as well be. It's just it's kind of like Southern America, right? Latin America. So America claims dominion over Latin America. Therefore, that's why they had to talk about the one in Latin America. But if you did a search, you might find several others in other parts of the world. There's one floating over Australia right now, for example. You know,
they think it's the same kind.
Well, of course it is. Yeah,
right.
There's a couple over Asia.
You're guessing, or there's
one over Ireland. There's one over. I mean, who gives a fuck? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody has ever cared. They do it all the time. It's happening very regularly all the time. And this suddenly, out of nothing,
got it.
You just like, suddenly make a big deal about party balloons at a birthday party, as if they never happened before. That's
well, they do make loud noises, and they can scare the children.
Exactly.
So I've been thinking we should ban them.
Right.
Your idea of a provocation, maybe from within China originally, with the hope that it'll be picked up in the way it has been picked up, thereby putting to bed background talks that were undesirable to a arch globalist direction. It reminds me of 1959. Gary Powers is flying over Russia with a high altitude glide spy plane with the camera
an
on
actual
it.
Spy plane,
an actual spy plane, a manned one. He's at 80,000 feet. I don't know how high they could go, but they were outside of the range of Russian SAM, so they couldn't be shot down. So it was undetected. But what happened? He ran out of fuel, and he had to glide down, and he was taken basically prisoner of war.
But the story behind that was designed to wreck. Yeah,
it was deliberate. Dulles arranged for him to land in Russia.
He ran out of fuel in the sense that he was deliberately not given enough fuel to complete the mission and get back home, and that he would run out over the Soviet Union, crash, and it would create an international incident.
And that had the effect of nixing an upcoming conference between Eisenhower and Khrushchev.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure like Xi has been investing quite a lot in, discussions and talks with the Americans and stuff. And, Xi isn't like a kind of warmonger, far from it. And, the Chinese mentality on this. So it's at least, it's pacifist to a fault almost, you know what I mean? And certainly the way Xi has been talking on this plan, meeting with Blinken, etc. Whether or not that was going to happen, but anyway, there's been other moves afoot over the past, months and even years that show a trend in our attitude of at least the official, Xi government, that they want to work things out. So this doesn't fit with that. Why would you set yourself up? I don't know if
something that can be tracked from coming way in.
Yeah,
but it's not going to be. It's not going to be a sneak surprise.
No, of course, yeah. But that's why. Well, in a sense, that would be part of the stealth aspect of it. It's something that happens fairly regularly, so the Americans don't pay any attention to it.
They notice it and move on.
They think it's going to go on a normal course, which might skirt a bit of the U.S. territory, whatever. But it's no big deal. But this one, for some reason, assuming it can be directed in a basic way, like altitude, that then allows it to adjust its course by catching different winds, that was done deliberately in order to have it
bisect the US.
Go through this prolonged flight over continental US. That again, it could have been played down. It could have been immediately. It could have just been said that this is one. They could have explained to people. They could have used past examples of it. They could have pulled up, past news articles from it. The media could have said this happens all the time if they were told to,
And
but
even if it is suspected of having military spy surveillance capability, you bury it, you eat it, and then you talk quietly behind and reprimand or
put up that
do something in
put up
response.
the WAPO again there, Scotty, just as an example. Like experts in national security said the craft appears to share characteristics with high altitude balloons used by developed countries around the world for weather forecasting, telecommunications, and scientific research. The payload doesn't offer much in the way of surveillance that China can't collect through satellites, and it poses no serious physical or intelligence threat, according to the Pentagon. So why was that not the final word on it? And why did all of the media not go with that? And then why did anybody who was trying to rabble-rouse over it be told, just shut up? It's ridiculous. We know exactly what this balloon is. It's no big deal. Okay, this one is spending more time over the US, but there have been at least 4 other balloons in the past 6 or 7 years that have in one way or another transited part of US territory, and nobody made a deal about it. And use the example of the Latin American one. There's one actually flying over several countries in Latin America now. Do you hear any of them crapping their pants about it? Why do you want us to make a big deal about this? It's nothing. It's nothing to make a big deal about. But yet they did, and they made it into. And the end result was it's almost like the Biden administration's hand was forced, because the really significant thing in this that'll go down in history, if you forget all the details that we're talking about now, because nobody will remember them. Most people don't know them right now and don't care, and therefore anybody who does won't remember them. But the vast majority of people won't remember them because they don't even know them and they don't care about them right now. What this will be recorded as is that a vehicle,
a UFO,
an aerial vehicle owned by the Chinese government, was shot down over America. So when you have to shoot down an aircraft, effectively, they shot down a Chinese aircraft over America. Just remember that. Think of that. Just forget about it was a balloon. America just shot down, the US Air Force just shot down a Chinese aircraft over America. And we're over American airspace.
that's the first shot has been fired.
That's the essence, yeah. That's the essence of the whole thing, yeah.
This will be the shot heard around the world.
Maybe.
The balloon burst heard around the world.
The bubble burst.
That sparked World War III.
It's ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous. But obviously, I think that we have to assume that somebody's playing games, somebody's messing around, and like I said, I leave it open the possibility that it was, a deliberate move on the Chinese, and to be honest, pretty smart one, like I said, because it put them in a bind. It was, in a certain sense, you could say it was a test. They had 3 options. 2 of them were not good options, and they picked one of those not good options. The 2 not good options were either shoot it down and make yourself look like a trigger-happy nutbag who can't tolerate a balloon flying over your country,
uniquely American,
or leave it alone and then have everybody say, "Look how weak you are! You can't even take care of this, intrusion into our airspace." A third option was to, like I said, in advance, get everybody on board and play it down and just say, "Listen, there's no problem." In fact, and even admit that we fly balloons over China. It's no big deal. This is a kind of treaty we have, a balloon treaty, where we get to fly balloons over. And in fact, they do have those spy flights over each other's territory.
Yeah. The Russian one's been cancelled.
Right. But for a long time, so it's not unusual. So they could have played it down. But apparently, they didn't have the power to play it down. And there are certain elements within the US government who wanted to hystericize the population over it and, sound the alarm over it for their own particular agenda. And the Chinese government, at least for their part, are going like, "Dude, what are you doing?
Overreaction. Yeah.
Chill out,
Yeah.
But like I said, maybe there was some element within the Chinese government who deliberately made this happen. It's either that, or it was accidental, which makes it even worse in a certain sense. If the whole thing was just like force majeure, then it's very sad. It's a very sad situation, because at least there was no intent. This is completely accidental.
It would fit with the clown world.
It would be like Franz Ferdinand being accidentally shot by a
pebble,
by a hunter's rifle from or some kid in the garden shot Franz Ferdinand by by accident, playing with his dad's gun. If it ends up being, like you said, the shot that echoes around the world, I don't necessarily think it will be. It's certainly not immediately. Well,
it might be part of building a
build-up,
a historical record that led to this unfortunate situation where, we had to take these crazy actions, or plausibly sane actions.
Yeah. But I think
to crush China.
Yeah, it's conditioning the population, I think, mostly. Obviously, the people that are able to be conditioned in that direction or want to be conditioned in that direction in terms of anti-China rhetoric. But I think the Biden administration will try and it'll go away. In a certain sense, they'll try and smooth things over and just carry on. And Blinken will go, next week or once something else comes in the news cycle, Blinken will still go to China if it'll happen, But yeah, if it was a deliberate move by some elements within the Chinese government, then it was a test, if you know what I mean. I would like to think it was that, because it's pretty smart actually. Flying something, ostensibly innocuous, but with a bit of ambiguity about it over America. But something that they shouldn't, if they're rational people, shouldn't react badly to, just to see how rational they are, to see what way the wind blows. No pun intended. To see what way the wind is blowing in America, who holds sway, who has control, what is the dominant narrative, who can shape public
opinion. Who's more likely to win an argument, the hawks or and clearly the hawks,
or rather who gets to shape public opinion around this event? And that's very important. That's whoever gets to shape public opinion arguably has the most power
and tells them something.
Well, it tells them who has the most power in the US. And what the attitude of the people who hold the most power in the US, because the people who hold the most power in any country, the people who are able to decisively shape public opinion, because it's only through public opinion that you can really, engage in, war or sort of conflict with China and stuff. Look at the way they're shaping the public opinion around Ukraine, or have been able to shape public opinion around Ukraine.
I think they'll have more success with shaping public opinion against China than they have had against Russia.
Yeah, well, they've had a lot of success with shaping public opinion against Russia. Go and ask anybody in the street, you know what I mean? Especially, it doesn't extend to just the past year. It's over the past freaking
Xenophobia trips off
years.
People's tongues quicker than Russophobia.
In the US.
In the US, yeah.
Maybe only recently since Putin. I don't know. The problem is there's
the Wu flu and Wuhan. They did
the COVID and all that. Yeah, I think it's probably equal, and that's telling. You know what I mean? Because China and Russia are America's
sick
enemies.
Of Russiagate, and they associate any mention of that word now with that's all bullshit. Ukraine.
Yeah, but
smells
Putin,
like bullshit to me.
Putin invaded Ukraine. He's an evil man.
They got a spike. They got mass support, probably majority support at the beginning, but that's been in a downward trajectory since then.
People looking away from it, but not necessarily informing themselves about what's really happening, right? I don't see any people waking up to the reality of the situation in Ukraine, right? Do you? Oh, obviously, there's people who are already.
I do, but maybe it's my Twitter bubble.
Well, you have to. I'm thinking here in terms of general population.
Yeah.
If you went to the average, average suburban enclave or whatever in America, and asked anybody what they thought about Putin specifically. What do you think of Putin? I would be very surprised if I didn't get bad man. From the average person. But then maybe those people who have these canned responses aren't really that important anyway. In terms of what they think isn't really that important, except that it allows their acquiescence or their believing of bullshit, lies and narrative and propaganda allows for the powers that be to do what they want, basically, funnel weapons into Ukraine, prolong a war, cause massive suffering and death, etc. And potentially irreparably damage the global economy, But there's no point in asking someone people like that don't have an informed opinion. You know what I mean? In the sense that you could ask them what do you think of Putin, they say bad man, and then you'd ask them to elaborate a bit, and they can't elaborate. So they don't have a detailed opinion, just like what they get from the news.
I saw a Gallup poll or something like that, and Russia being an issue was like 1%. whereas 90 said the economy. Or,
right, but that's always been for a long time. That's been the case. Like, it's you have to separate out what you think of someone and whether or not he's a problem for your country right now.
How would you rate these problems?
Yeah, in terms of what's most important to you, yeah. But I think that's always been the case, for a very long time. People always think, especially in any country, are more about their personal issues or personal problems at home. Do you know what today is? The 20th
anniversary of the vile speech, Powell's vile speech.
A very
pun intended.
A very dirty speech. Yeah. On this day 20 years ago, this guy who
Powell.
This guy who went to the UN, if you remember, and he did that. Basically, that was his that was his argument. Yeah, it had aspirin in it, I think. But he held it up as an example of this much anthrax would be enough to take down 15 overweight Americans.
Yeah.
It's
hard to believe it's 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago. So he arguably just 20 years ago, that day, him doing that, him propagating that big lie, basically. Obviously, he's talking about Iraq there as well. It was to justify the invasion of Iraq, an occupation of Iraq, post 9/11, where Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, but he decided somehow they went from, the Twin Towers being, planes flying into the Twin Towers, to this dude, less than 2 years later, sitting in the UN, holding up a little vial of aspirin and saying, Saddam has chemical weapons, and this is a facsimile, like an example of what a chemical weapon might look like if, you made it at home or something. And this much can kill so many people, and this is why we need to invade Iraq. And, the whole world really has gone to hell since then.
And he didn't believe it. He spoke to his deputy Wilkerson afterwards, and he didn't believe it.
He called the people pushing for it.
He did that knowing he was lying.
Yeah.
Conscious lying. He's since died. So,
good. He, in years since then.
The COVID got him. Or maybe the vax.
Years since then, he said that the people who ultimately were pushing for that war and invasion of Iraq were, he specifically, and I quote, the phrase he used were fucking crazies. He called them fucking crazies. So,
if it was the COVID that killed him, how ironic then that if the Chinese conspiracy theory is correct,
it was a chemical weapon that killed him.
WMD killed him.
Yeah. Damn. Wonder if he's sitting up in heaven, wondering about that, going, damn, fuck, that's ironic, man. Jeez, if only I could go back and talk to myself.
20 years later, the tin pot dictator of Ukraine is speaking virtually at the UN, holding up vials like that and saying, there's no way that's going to last me through the night. Send more.
Mm-hmm. Lots more. And speaking of neocons, because obviously, kind of speaking of neocons, you see because obviously neocons were the ones, the Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Crystal, were the people who pushed for. They're the ones who did the Project for the New American Century, or penned the Project for the New American Century, and basically they plan to project American power because, in a post-Cold War world, in the late 90s, they're writing post-Cold War world, America has, if America doesn't do something, they foresaw basically the rise of Russia and the rise of China, particularly the rise of Russia, and its ability to gain power and influence control over the Middle East. And in that context, if America didn't do something about it in the near future, they're writing again here in the late 1990s, saying that America was going to fail as a global empire, as a global hegemon. They needed to do something about it, and they needed to project American power around the world to strategic areas. The primary one being the Middle East. So they wrote that in the late 90s, 1989. Those kind of papers were were written and released by these neocons. But a year later, Bush is in power, and a year after that, 9/11, and they have their new Pearl Harbor type event that allows them to do what they had written about just a few years previously, about needing to be done, what America needed to do, which is project its armed forces around the world and boots on the ground. So, so one of them, Chris, what I call him, what's his first name? Crystal. His first name should be Crystal. This dude,
Irving.
Is it Irving?
Some of them there's brothers and cousins.
Bill Crystal. So he's a neocon type. And here's just getting back to the balloon thing. Here's what his inane statement on the balloon. If the balloon had anti-black history messages stenciled on it, or if it were dropping anti-trans pamphlets down to earth, or if it were broadcasting denunciations of wokeness non-stop, MAGA would be pro-balloon. They'd be welcoming the balloon. They'd be worshipping the balloon. I mean, talk about being irrelevant and being an anachronism, basically. That guy, hey, Bill, the late 1990s are calling and they want you back. And so do we want you to go back there because you're really, I mean, that's what he lowers himself to. Like, pathetic, left, right politicking over and using shitty, stupid analogies. I mean, this guy's supposedly, look what he obviously he's promoting all the things there that he's, accusing MAGA of being not liking. Yeah. He's promoting those things. Obviously, he's in support of those. And this guy's he's a neocon. He's a neoconservative. Mm-hmm. He's a new conservative, and he's attacking conservatives.
Well, the reason they were neo was because they were leaving behind nativist, isolationist conservatism,
right,
to conservatism of conserving the post-war order,
conserving the global order,
hence, yeah,
conserving America's hegemony, what somehow involves promoting transgender.
But it's at the leading edge of the whole of that wave.
And minority
the United
rights.
States embassies. It literally comes from their embassies. The propaganda. He's talking about propaganda leaflets. They come out of U.S. embassies.
How do you maintain your position as global hegemon
by queering the planet?
Through promotion of queering the planet and promoting non-binary, transgender, minority.
If you were doing it consciously, politics. That is, you didn't really believe it was actually for the betterment of people, and that it would have deleterious effects. If you were consciously aware of that and doing it, it's probably fitting with your meta theory last week, in which the US is gearing up to take the whole planet down economically. If I can't have it, you can't either. Russia and China and Iran, etc., are rising, so we need to knock out some pillars in the global economy to prevent any pure competitor from supplanting us as global hegemon. So this would be part of it. This would be a cultural element,
cultural war,
cultural aspect of it, to consciously and deliberately wreck the natural order elsewhere. Maybe that's assuming too much, though. I mean, these people are. Who was it? Yeah, well, I can't remember. I'm mixing different ideas, but I think I have to quote myself. They're kind of alien. They're kind of not with us. Bush said you're with us or against us. Like, by their actions, they really do set themselves apart from the rest of the species. There's variation, of course. There's cultural relativism. Not everywhere's the same, but there's a lot of things people from Indonesia to Russia to Western Europe share in common. Some Americans, or a good chunk of them, or a lot of them, or most of them, I don't know, but they really are different. And when you can say something like that and have it make sense to his audience, maybe half of Americans, they'll not long go, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was just thinking the same thing myself. The rest of us look and go, that's pathological. Like, you're outside of normal discourse. We can't relate to that. We know what you're alluding to because we've been aware of the other kinds of things you've been saying in recent years, but we're not with you on that, mate. That doesn't make any sense. WTF?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. I suppose then it's... Well, look at what we know from... there's I think researchers say, at the end of Rome, late stage Rome, like... sexual mores going all over the place in similar ways. Just kind of adult cultural degradation resulting from material excess, and a lack of suffering / meaning to maintain purpose and going forwards. America's thus far has been great at going forwards, all the way up to space exploration, progress, developing in positive senses of those words. But now it has the same industrial drive, psychological, deep-rooted drive to messianically propel themselves and everyone else forwards. But the goals are like abhorrent and aberrant to the rest of the species. And they're articulating it more and more. We've seen the Russians are at the forefront of articulating a backlash, a kind of countercultural to this development. But there are others too. There's you would probably expect it from Hungary. Hungarian minister lashes out at U.S. ambassador for meddling in... Let's open it up. I think it was for meddling on issues of social issues in Hungary. Nobody can tell Hungary citizens how they should live. Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó says he issued a scathing rebuke of the U.S. ambassador to Budapest on Thursday.
Did you hear what he said exactly?
The ambassador or the minister?
The Turkish foreign minister.
Oh no, that's the Turkey. That's a different.
Oh, sorry, you're talking about
this is in Hungary.
Hungary, yeah.
Can you scroll down? When asked to respond, oh well, maybe it wasn't. It wasn't about social issues, was it? It was about Hungary's stance on Ukraine. Okay, so that doesn't count.
Nobody can tell us tell us from the outside how to live. It is of no interest when what a citizen of another country, be it an ambassador, thinks about the domestic political process in Hungary. Yeah, well, that's it.
Okay,
definitely.
Excuse me, that was over Ukraine, so that wasn't about. But Hungary, everyone knows Hungary's been bashed one way, up one way and down the other, especially by Brussels, threatening sanctions over social policy, internal social policy issues.
Yeah.
So
and yeah, Turkey, the Turkish foreign minister took a swipe, pretty serious swipe as well. This relates to the burning of the Quran in Sweden. Of course, the background to that is that Turkey is supposedly stopping Sweden's, won't agree to Sweden's accession to the EU or to NATO, because Turkey says that the Swedish government is basically harboring Turkish or Kurdish terrorists, and they want them extradited to Turkey. And the Swedes apparently don't want to do that. And Turkey's saying, well, then if you don't do that, we're not going to agree to Sweden's admission to NATO. And then recently, over the past couple of weeks, there's been some dude that was accused of being a Russian, actually a Russian agent or something, which is obviously everybody I don't like is Russian. Some guy in Sweden was burning the Quran, supposedly representing, as an attack against, and associated with a denunciation of Turkey on the part of the Kurds in Sweden, and because of Turkey's belligerent attitude towards Kurdish people, or Kurdish as they call them, terrorists in Sweden. Anyway, this just a few days ago was from the Turkish foreign minister. Actually, what are we going to do?
The interior minister?
Sorry, I think he's
Süleyman Soylu.
Yes, sorry, interior minister, not foreign minister.
I have the RT story on it, or one of. They have two.
Yeah, well,
he said two things at two events, but
this is Middle East Eye. But just put that one up for a second. Take your dirty hands off Turkey, Ankar's interior minister tells U.S. envoy. He hit out the US ambassador in Ankara after Washington and 8 European countries issued travel warnings over possible terror attacks in Turkey. Again, if you scroll down, it just mentions the fact that, well, actually, it's pretty interesting. Turkey Interior Minister railed against the US ambassador, telling him to take his dirty hands off Turkey. He's an ardent critic of the United States, whom he blames for the 2006 military coup attempt, which we also blame the Americans for. Military coup attempt in Turkey in 2016. That was, Erdogan's butt was saved allegedly by Putin or by Russia, who gave him intelligence about an upcoming attempt to take him out, basically as part of the attempted coup in 2016. So the US, along with 8 European countries, temporarily closed embassies and consulates in Turkey or issued travel warnings after the Quran burning protests in Europe. This interior minister says, every US ambassador who arrives in Turkey is hurrying to find out how to make a coup possible in Turkey, said Soylu, referring to US Ambassador Jeffrey Flake. I addressed the EU ambassador from here. I know the journalists you made write articles, he said. Just play the video there since it's a bit more instructive.
Amerikan Büyükelçisi'ne buradan söylüyorum. Hangi gazetecilere yazı yazdırdığını biliyorum. Pis ellerini Türkiye'nin üzerinden çek. Çok net söylüyorum. Pis ellerini Türkiye'nin üzerinden çek.
Get your dirty hands off Turkey.
Hangi adımları attırdığınızı, Türkiye'yi nasıl karıştırmak istediğinizi net bir şekilde biliyoruz. O pis ellerinizi, o maskeli, sırıtan yüzlerinizi Türkiye'nin üzerinden çekiniz. Bu kadar açık ve net.
Those grinning
mask faces. I'm telling you, they see them more and more like aliens.
Yeah. Well, he's talking there about the COVID. They're still pushing the whole.
Oh, was he? I thought he meant more like you come here with your smiles.
Well, maybe.
But you're doing something else. I read something else from that. You mentioned. So the thing was the US and several other European countries.
Yeah, I think it was maybe what you're saying.
Suggested people don't travel because of possible upcoming security threats, terrorist attacks.
Because of this.
And he's like, you bastard. They did that on the day that Turkey has, I think, this speech he gave there, where they were announcing they were reopening to tourists in a big way. And they hope to attract millions more tourists back, especially from the West. And he's like, you bastards, you just completely undermine what we're trying to do. But there's more to that. I think he's the guy who gave an impromptu press conference outside at the location where there was a terrorist attack in Istanbul last month. And he basically said, I know America's behind this. I know American agents caused the bomb to go off. I know that you did this to us. So there's a lot to this. Like, and he's obviously referencing 2016, but he's also saying, and more, this is normal everyday speech in public discourse in Turkey, that the Americans and or others conduct terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
Not just random Islamists who want to do jihad.
Right. And that bomb in Istanbul last month, it was in middle of November, they officially accused the PKK, of the Kurdish kind of workers' party, right, that the Turks have had a long-term problem with, because the Kurds want, the Kurds have long wanted independence, by way of not independence, but essentially an enclave, independent enclave in part of Turkey, in the north of Turkey, north and east of Turkey. So this is Turkey's long-term problem with the Kurds and Kurdish terrorism, as they describe it. And they accused in that bombing in Istanbul, they claimed it was, the PKK, but like you said, at the same time, they said, we know who the PKK are getting help from, effectively, and they're being facilitated by, and pointed to America, effectively. So it's interesting, because it highlights the fact that Turkey has a legitimate concern here. You know what I mean? It's not just about wanting the extradition of the people they claim are Kurdish terrorists being ensconced in Sweden, but rather that there's fairly relatively regular actual bombings and attacks in major Turkish cities that are sometimes and sometimes not claimed by the PKK.
Yeah.
So it's not just it's not just Turkey being
upset because of burnt Qurans. Of course not. Yeah. No, there's real concern for bomb attacks going off in Istanbul.
Yeah.
In the RT write-up I have, he also said, Suleiman, that European nations were, quote, run by American diplomats. I mean, these people are in a position to know, apart from like one or two parliamentary reports about Operation Gladio in 1990, 1991, and I quickly went to bed as soon as, that made the Cold War playbook was closed by the US. So that was the end of any discussion of those. Well, in the 90s in Turkey, they didn't end it there. It's the only country in NATO, Stan, that went full hog with deep investigations, and they call it the Ergenekon network.
Right.
Stay behind NATO system.
Yeah.
It took is it even gone? Possibly not. There's still US nukes there. Look what happened in 2016. That caused mass arrests. 18,000 people were rounded up for questioning in Turkey. You can imagine what you can do when you have access to a country for half a century,
Yeah.
But no country in NATO went further than Turkey in doing something about it, or keeping it in check, and or being aware of it and just sharing it with the public. All the other governments, like Western Europe, they're just chicken shit. They just bury it and go, well, okay, we won't talk about it, we won't tell anyone. It'll be a conspiracy theory between us, But there, they actually care when a bomb goes off and kills their own people. They don't go like French official, who was it? Manuel Valls, after what, like a Paris Bataclan atrocity, he's like, well, we're just going to have to get used to these things, aren't we?
Exactly, yeah.
They would never do that in Turkey.
Right.
So they at least care a bit more. They're less, Frankenstein, they're less like non-human aliens, psychos, basically.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a showdown, I think. Maybe they can agree to disagree and they'll just leave NATO. I don't think the US can physically. They already tried it, didn't they? 2016 to do regime change. But there's other ways that they can operate. The Turkish lira is not great. Inflation's like 55%. They have financial problems. I'm sure that's largely externally manipulated.
Right.
On similar news, Bloomberg reports Turkey and United Arab Emirates ordered to cut trade with Russia. I don't have I have the RT report, but it's based on the Bloomberg report. U.S. Treasury official reportedly argued that attempts to damage the Russian economy are being hampered, and singled out Turkey and the UAE.
Yeah, well, they haven't. The UAE hasn't imposed sanctions against Russia.
And who was this? Brian Nelson, Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence at the U.S. Treasury. So he visits Turkey last week in the midst of this spat.
Yeah.
So if you give the two fingers to the ambassador on security issues over here, while you're doing that, your interior minister is doing that, Brian Nelson, Undersecretary of the U.S. Treasury, is flying in over here and talking to someone else in your government.
It's Roman.
They're all over the place.
It's empire. It's prefects, Roman prefects, flying around or traveling around the empire, trying to shore up the crumbling edifice. The crumbling structures of empire, and more the areas of empire under imperial rule are rebelling. They're pushing back. It's bizarre when people take it as a normal, given they've normalized it a long time before now. But like, it was just some article or some headline talking about how maybe it was with Blinken going over to, supposedly before he postponed his trip to China. And was part of it was to go and talk about, putting pressure on China to impose sanctions or keep up with sanctions, or to not be flouting sanctions against Russia. If you think about that, if you remove, if you get out of the kind of headspace of of the 20th century, let's say, or the last 100 years that we've lived in, and how the world looks to you. Just think about that, where you have one country way over the other side of the world demanding that another country stop or get on board with its sanctions against one of its allies, a third country who's involved in a war for its own defense or its own protection of the Russian claim,
its own interest.
Yeah, and to like think that you can go over there and, you know, kind of carry a big stick and force like a country like China to impose sanctions on someone that it doesn't want to impose sanctions on because it serves America's interests, and that's normal. You know, everybody thinks that's normal. Everybody thinks that, well, anybody America is sanctioning must be bad, right? And that all of America's sanctions are justified and you know, and right, you know, and it's just bizarre.
It used to work with through bribes. Remember that from Economic Hitman, by John Perkins. But it's not working anymore. Bribes aren't enough. They don't attract the right people in the target countries anymore,
right?
Because they see a lot more developmental potential if they turn down the bribe and instead conduct the very trade Washington does not want to see happen. Look at this one here from. This is all impossible. They're trying to do the impossible. This is just one article. I'll mention another one as Scotty's putting this headline up. Russian LNG sales are through the roof, 12% up over last year. So even in the very field that they're supposed to lose from because the pipelines were blown up or shut down or sanctioned the shit out of, Russia's just like, well, we'll fill in the vacuum. Everyone else is doing LNG. So their own LNG sales are through the roof.
Yeah. Like America's are and other countries.
At a different sphere, Russia ramps up global food exports. Supplies have exceeded 70 million tons in 2022. That's a jump of 12% in monetary terms to the year before.
Yeah.
You know,
let's
crush Russia, and then the results of that attempt, the whack-a-mole attempt, produces the opposite reaction. In fact, there's more trading, more dealing going on.
Yeah, exports of oil and fat products and dairy, grain exports increased by 14%. Oil and fat products soared by 26%. But that's probably filling in the shortfall from Ukraine. You know, so basically Russia is getting Ukraine's business right now. You know, you could see that as well. That's pretty convenient for Russia, right? They just took Ukraine as a fairly large wheat and oil, seed oil exporter out of the market, and it's taking the business, you know. But
the central point of all that is to prop up the US dollar,
right?
Of course, make sure it remains the dominant world reserve currency. It still is the case, like 90% used in all trades everywhere. But take a look at the next headline. Central bank gold buying soars to 55-year high. So even like there is such a thing as an objective market. The market does go up and down. It's not controlled completely. It is a thing to itself. And you end up having central bankers who shake your hand and take the bribe, and they're on your side. But even their own actions at the desk in Switzerland or wherever, they don't produce the results in the market they intend. You know,
because the market has to keep operating, despite your sanctions. Basically,
what this is telling us is the bankers out there of the world are not trusting in the full faith and credit of the US dollar.
No, more and more of them are going. They're trying to secure their positions by investing in gold. Yeah, but interestingly, gold doesn't increase. You know, gold purchasing soared by 18% in 2022, but the price of gold didn't go up 18% in 2022. You know, so usually demand will increase the price, right? That's how the market works, right? Demand increases the price. Apparently not for gold or silver. You know, and obviously that claim has been made for a very long time, that the price of gold and silver and other precious metals is kept artificially low for various different reasons. But
Bojo was caught in a flagrant lie this week.
Yeah. Oh, about he's going to be a laser beam. A laser beam was going to be shot at him from the Kremlin.
Can we play it? Because it's a lie.
Yeah.
It's like other leaders, they equivocate, they mislead, misspeak, etc., etc. You know, they're politicians. They're good at trying to convince you of something, but not going too far because they know they could be caught in a lie. This little shite, is rather large shite actually, just lied.
Big wobbly buffoon.
They just outright lied. There's a couple of things that expose the lie. One is that someone who was there said that's not what was said, but there's more than that. So, well, that's the response from Peskov above. Let's have a listen to Bojo telling BBC what Boris said to him.
Boris, you say that Ukraine is not going to join NATO anytime soon. He said it in English, anytime soon. What is anytime soon? And I said, well, it's not going to join NATO for the foreseeable future. You know that perfectly well. Fundamentally, it wasn't about... You know, he threatened me at one point and said, you know, Boris, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile, it would only take a minute or something like that, you know. Jolly. But I think from the very relaxed tone...
It's an actual video of this phone call.
The sort of air of detachment that he seemed to have. He was just playing along with my attempts to get him to negotiate.
Right, so he attempted to water down the potential impact of what Johnson had just claimed by saying, well, I don't think he was serious and he didn't mean it. You know, he was just trying to get me to negotiate. But anyone who knows Putin and the kinds of things he says in public and in private, because he knows that he can no longer rely on those conversations to be kept private, knows that he would never threaten it like someone to their face like that.
Openly, yeah.
And the British media took that BBC clip of an interview with Johnson, and the headlines were that Putin, on the eve of the war last year, had threatened to nuke London. So they obviously take the lie one step further. But it's interesting that what Peskov said in response, I was listening on the call. No, that wasn't said at all. Either he misunderstood what was said, or more likely he's just outright lying. Scholz was asked this week in Germany, you had a call with Putin just before. Was there anything like that? No, quote, Putin did not threaten me or Germany.
Yeah.
So,
but he saved his threat for Boris, you know, because Boris is so special. And in related news, Liz Truss, the short-lived erstwhile
who?
UK Prime Minister there for a couple of weeks last year. She had a talk with Putin and he threatened to shoot her with a laser.
She didn't really say that, did she?
She did, a laser beam, yeah. He said, you know, Liz, I don't want to hurt you, but I have space-based laser with your name on it. One wrong move from you, Liz, and you toast. Literally toast, he said.
That's why she left.
Resigned. Freaked out, like, oh my God, I don't want to die by Putin laser, so I'm leaving. That's the secret behind why she actually was only there for 6 weeks or so. That's breaking news there. You can take that to the bank, people. Heard it here first.
She actually said in an op-ed somewhere, the Times, that or they're serializing her memoirs or something. She left because of a left-wing establishment conspiracy to oust her.
Of course. Conspiracy.
But that may actually have some truth to it. Because you remember that at the time, the Bank of England was up to shenanigans, initially giving her an okay for her drastic revive the economy plan. But then when she published it, the basic outline of the plan, they were like, no, this is not good. The pound is sinking. Oh my God, she has to go. So there was something like that going on.
Did you see, maybe, if I'm not going to find it, the former Israeli Prime Minister, probably didn't recognize them. They've been really prime ministers have been in and out very quickly in the past few years. But Naftali Bennett gave an interview. Who did he give an interview to? I don't know who exactly it was, but he gave an interview talking, and the media are actually covering it. But the if you look up, if you put his name in the Google search for news, whatever, you'll see that the headlines are all about Putin. He said he's talking about, to give an interview, he's talking about his time as prime minister, and because it was over the last, because Netanyahu just got back in, so he was the prime minister for most of last year, and so he's talking about Ukraine, and the main headlines you'll see with that refer to him in the past day or two is Putin promised me he would not kill Zelensky. So this is part of the interview where he actually said that he had a talk with Putin, and he asked Putin, what did he say here? Bennett says, I asked, are you planning to kill Zelensky? Putin said, I won't kill Zelensky. And then I said to him, I have to understand that you're giving me your word that you won't kill Zelensky. And Putin said, I'm not going to kill Zelensky. At least not with laser. No, he didn't say that. But Bennett said he then called the Ukrainian leader on his way to Moscow's airport, and he told him, Putin's not going to kill you. And Zelensky said, are you sure? And I told him, yes, 100%. He won't kill you. And then...
But look out for lasers.
But watch out for laser. He won't kill you, but he might toast. He might, warm you up a little bit with a laser. No. So then apparently at that time Zelensky, this was in the beginning in March, not long after the special military operation. And Zelensky at the time was in a bunker because he thought he was going to be taken out. That there was a threat of him being taken out at the beginning. So then after he got this assurance from Bennett, supposedly via Putin, that he wouldn't be killed, Zelensky crawled out of his bunker and was on TV saying, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm here for the duration, and we're going to nuke Moscow. But in that same interview, and you won't find this, it's weird because they refer to the interview, and they've obviously these journalists, Western media journalists, watched the interview. In that same interview, Bennett says that there were 17 different kind of possible treaties. I think 17 different possible treaties that Ukraine and Russia had signed in the background as the kind of SMO before and after the SMOs began, and i.e. peace treaties. Mm-hmm. And that, according to Bennett, they were nixed by Western countries. So any possibility of peace breaking out fairly quickly after the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine was nixed definitively by Western governments, because they're the ones who want the conflict in Ukraine, and they want it to keep going, despite the interests of the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, and this supports the idea that there were basically thus far two phases to Russia's SMO. The first one, where they had massive inroads towards Kiev up through the center, were designed to spook, and they had the effect of forcing discussion. Then they were nixed, and then we moved into phase two. Mm-hmm. So it succeeded. People were like, oh, the Russians suck. Oh, they had to flee Kiev. Well, no, it actually succeeded in getting what they sought. But y'all took it to phase two. Washington and London primarily.
Yeah.
So
so you have to dig for it. You can find the interview itself. But of course, it's only in either Russian sources or other non-Western sources, like this one. This is TASS, which is a Russian news agency. Basically, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Zakharova, recalled that Bennett, who acted as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine at the beginning of the special operation, said that all of his actions had been agreed in detail with the United States, Germany, and France. She slammed Israeli former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's remark that talks between Russia and Ukraine at the beginning of the special military operation were interrupted by Western countries as another confession. So she's pissed off that basically only now, almost a year later, is he admitting and speaking up about the fact that the West is directly complicit in preventing peace in Ukraine shortly after the Russians actually, or even before the Russians began their special military operation, says that she recalled that Bennett, who acted as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine at the beginning of the SMO, said that all of his actions had been agreed in detail with the United States, Germany, and France. They interrupted the talks, he said. The former Israeli Prime Minister, she noted, also said that at some point the West decided to crush Russian President Vladimir Putin rather than to negotiate. Yet another confession, Zakharova wrote on her Telegram channel.
I have a question. Does that make Washington and London party to the war?
What? Initiating it?
Well, blocking, extending, turning a war from phase 1 to phase 2, and being the sole reason for it.
Well, we talked about this last week. It depends what your definition of party to the war is, you know.
Tobias Elwood, you know him, MP, big shot, Tory senior backbencher. He said definitively on BBC last week, we are at war with Russia. We, Britain, are in direct war with Russia.
Yeah. Just on that same interview, Bennett also said that it was, in terms of asking Putin, are you going to kill Zelensky, and promise me you won't kill Zelensky? Is this your word now? You're not going to kill Zelensky? And Putin's like, yes, listen, I'm not going to kill Zelensky. Don't worry about it. Bennett said that it was Zelensky who asked Bennett to raise that topic with Putin. He's like, listen, really, Prime Minister, Mr. Prime Minister of Israel, can you get on the phone with Putin and just ask him if he's going to kill me or not? Because I'd like to know, because this bunker is getting a bit claustrophobic, and I'd like to be able to come out. And can you get me some assurances that he's not going to kill me? Can you imagine that? I mean, two supposedly warring parties, you know, and the leader of one of the warring parties is asking a third party to ask the enemy, can you ask him not to kill me, please?
Well, I think it's interesting that it's the Israeli, and that Zelensky, the Israeli PM, and that the Zelensky, also being Jewish, is comfortable enough to act on that. He sees in that a form of guarantee. That indeed, if Putin has given his word to Israel, chances are he'll keep it, because, you know, Israel is, you know, first among equals.
Yeah.
The house rules, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, Israel has invested, and Netanyahu said that recently, like in terms of on the topic of whether or not Israel was going to send its Iron Dome. Talk about Israel's Iron Dome being sent to Ukraine, you know, and he's saying, well, we'll have to think about that and stuff. And he said specifically that we have other considerations in terms of whether or not to supply offensive weapons to Ukraine, because not so many words. He said that both Russian and Israeli air forces use Syrian airspace, are active in Syrian airspace, and are, you know, in quite close proximity. And the Israelis obviously are using Syrian airspace to attack Iran in quote unquote self-defense. So they effectively need to keep on good terms with Russia in order to continue to have a
it's a simple
peaceable.
It's a simple equation. The better their relations with Russia, the more stable Iran.
Not the more stable, and the more
towards them.
the more of a free hand they have in terms of attacking Iran, specifically via Syria. You know what I mean? If things ever soured seriously between between Israel and Russia, there may be problems in terms of both of them operating peaceably over Syrian airspace, and in Syria specifically. You know?
Yeah.
So it's all a bit messed up.
Putin was in Volgograd for the 80th anniversary of Stalingrad. The city's been renamed. The Red Army victory there. That was in the news for its own reason. The Western media again interpreted his statements as Putin threatens to nuke us. He didn't know such thing. He just said, well, I suppose you could take that implication. He was saying, okay, so now they've agreed to send German tanks, and he noted the symbolism of it. Once again, we'll have German tanks in Ukraine, manned by Banderites with the Iron Cross on the side of them. Obviously, speaking of Stalingrad, so he's going to note that. But they should understand that. What did he say? They should understand that it's not tanks we'll be replying with, or something like that. So, but there was something else that happened there that was curious. I don't know. This may have been a nothing burger, but let's see if we can get it. This is reported in the Daily Mail, but they're getting it from a Russian Telegram channel, which I couldn't find actually. They claim it's. We'll put the headline up. I've excerpted the text. The Daily Mail is like a casino online, especially if you have the ads. You have to have the ads on because they no longer. You can't use an ad blocker on this website or it won't work at all. Oh, look, it looks reasonably normal. Okay. Headline: Putin is buzzed by color-changing UFO spotted by 4 Russian planes as he makes speech threatening nuclear war against the West. Or he didn't threaten nuclear war against the West, but whatever. So the details in it are Aviators China Telegram channel.
It came from Telegram channel, yeah.
Reported the crew of an Airbus A321 of S7 Airlines operating a flight from Sochi to Moscow 12 minutes before reaching Volgograd at an altitude of 10,000 meters reported that they observed an unidentified flying object at right angles to the plane on its left side. The object was supposedly changing color and height and direction of movement. This channel, Aviators China, that makes sense. The channel monitors air incidents, and it added later that the crews of Aeroflot, a different flight, Su-1125, and Russia flight Su-6358, confirmed this information after themselves flying on approach or departure from Volgograd. The Russia plane crew assessed the distance of the UFO at around 125 miles. The sightings were reported to air traffic control. Permission to use the airspace was not issued. The S7 crew reported the timing at 19:08 Moscow time on Thursday, which is around 3 hours after Putin's arrival in Volgograd and occurred as he took part in the commemorations. Basically when he was giving that speech. I don't know. It's just maybe nothing. Maybe something. It reminds me of the nuclear missile silos in the 50s and 60s in the US getting buzzed every time they went weapons hot for tests or something. Okay.
I have one last one. Do you have much more you want to talk about?
Well, we were laughing at the fireball that didn't happen. Well, the near-miss asteroid they were tracking last week.
Yeah.
Since then, there was a spectacular actual meteor fireball over Siberia. Don't know if we want to...
You got some video?
I have some, yeah.
Show the video. Just so people know what we're dealing with.
Southern Siberia, not far from Chelyabinsk, actually. No, different city, Krasnoyarsk. But this is video, CCTV, and other mobile cams from the city.
Where's the video?
Well, it's 4 of them. Do they play here? Can you play one of them?
They look like just screenshots, no? Oh, they're videos, yeah. Okay. You have to open and expand a bit. Yeah. There you go. Show me the fireball. Yep, that's a good example. Like, that's not a shooting star, you know what I mean? People know what shooting stars are, like the little pinpricks flying across the sky, like the meteor showers, whatever they call them, that happen once a year. But this, these are obviously, and just in case anybody doesn't know, this kind of thing has been seen that to that extent as well. That one's pretty impressive, but there's a lot of others are equally impressive over the past few years that have been equally impressive, and the number of them has been increasing, not exponentially necessarily, but year on year for the past 10 years, more and more and more and more. And that one we were talking about last week, where it was in the media about this little meteorite, this little asteroid that was seen, that was being tracked by they were attempting to track it, and they had some video. I actually watched it late in the evening. Its closest pass was going to be 2,000 miles above the surface of the Earth and stuff. And in reports on that, they said, "Don't worry, it's not going to hit the Earth, because if it did anyway, it would just burn up in a bit of a fireball, and that would be it." So they make a big deal about this one that isn't going to actually get even close enough and come into the atmosphere to burn up, and make a big deal about it. Oh, look, we're seeing it fly by. While almost weekly, you obviously have asteroids that size and possibly bigger doing what you've just seen in those videos, i.e. burning up, doing what they said that one that they were tracking wasn't going to do, so wasn't a threat. And they say nothing about this significant number of weekly fireballs burning up in the atmosphere. Explain it to me, Neil.
They're just so proud of their surveillance of it. The fact that they managed to catch something beforehand. Watch this, we can track these things come in. We're going to be so fine, people. Nothing's going to go wrong ever.
Right.
But if something happens that's not outside their control, they're like, nah, la, 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 la. So anyway, in other news.
Yeah.
A couple of other things. Watch the space in Ireland. I think the protests there are growing week by week. And the government's having to start reacting. Basically protest against huge numbers of migrants coming in. It's a small country, 5 million north and south, but they're expecting by year's end, 2023, 180,000. 90,000 more this year, which would double the number of current asylum applicants. And but there's a lot of, it's anecdotal. I don't know. It's having enough of a real world effect that when buses arrive from the airport into usually working class areas, and a bunch of men come off and they're put up in a hotel or something, and then incidents are happening, crimes, rapes, etc. This is basically the same as elsewhere in Europe, but it seems to be more concentrated or pronounced, or it's having there's more of a backlash. It's sharper. It's come on kind of suddenly. So watch the space. I think they've already started a bit of a crackdown on protest organizers. They arrested one of them last week and banned him from all social media. This might spiral into another kind of smaller version of the Canadian trucker convoy movement.
Yeah. Just since we have it there, just throw that up there, Scotty. This is just getting back to the fireball thing, just to validate what I was saying, to highlight what I was saying about the increasing number. There's a chart, goes back to 2006, and that's the year on year. The different colors there are events with more than 10 number of reports, more than 25, more than 50, and more than 100. So you're up at and that's per year. 2022, it's up at 500 sightings of those kind of meteorite fireballs in the sky that similar to the ones we saw there from Russia.
Yeah,
and that's the graph showing year on year increase. And yet they get us all worked up at one little space rock that's flying through the sky and isn't going to come anywhere near us. There's one last.
That's such a huge change.
There's one last thing I just want to highlight, just because it's on the same topic as that one about I don't know if it's on the same topic as UFOs. About Putin and his UFOs. The UFOs buzzing Putin. Did they buzz him? They didn't buzz him. They were just over the area. Anyway,
yeah, over the city.
Let's call it. Let's say they were buzzing Putin. Because it's gets more clicks, right? This woman, Nicola Bulley, she disappeared. She's a mother of two, Nicola Bulley, 45-year-old, last seen next to the River Wyre in St Michael's on Wyre, Lancashire, northeast England, a week ago. So she's walking her dog, I think, most mornings along this river, close to her house. Dropped off her daughters beforehand, 8, 6 and 9 at school on the 27th of January. Last confirmed sighting of her by another person, another walker, was at 9:10 in the morning. She was seen on the upper field, so not right beside the river or anything. She was with her dog, her spaniel. Her dog was found, Willow was found running loose off a road about 25 minutes after she was last seen by another dog walker. So at 9:20, police believe her phone was on a bench while connected to a work team's meeting, which ended 10 minutes later. And so she was on this work team meeting. She had her camera off and her audio off because she wasn't actually talking, or she was just listening in. So she vanished in that 10-minute window. There's a map just down below there. You can see it's fairly, it's right beside the village, I think, that she lived in. It's not right along the river. Part of it's close enough to the river, but not exactly. Number 4 there is where they found her phone on a bench. And so this is something she's done every day, most days, let's say, every morning, goes for a walk. There's CCTV cameras at the kind of entrance and exit of that walk or that path along there, and they're fairly sure that she did not leave the area. And their only conclusion is then the dog was found just running around. Dog wasn't wet. The only conclusion is that the only thing they can come up with, understandably, is that she somehow decided to, or fell into the river, or jumped into the river, or whatever, and
was washed away.
And it's not exactly a big river either. You know what I mean? It's a fairly small river. It's not exactly very deep in most places. But she just up and disappeared. So
literally,
yeah. And it's been a week, So just for people who don't know, this is if you want to know more about that kind of topic of disappearing people in very strange circumstances. Some of them never to be found again. Some of them found again in very strange circumstances. Look up David Paulides or Paulides. He's got a bunch of books called Missing 411. He's also on Twitter, and he has a few documentaries out. So it's just an interesting topic for you to keep in mind, in parallel with all the shenanigans going on around the world.
Strangeness. In sports news this week, Novak Djokovic won the Australian Open in a glorious FU to COVID, to the Five Eyes, to anti-Slav racism over the war. I thought that was perfect. A year later, for all that shite from the Australian government, you can't come here, you're not vaccinated. Well, I'm not going to get it. Well, then you cannot play. Okay, then fine. I'm going home. Fine. A year later, he wins.
Yeah.
This is glorious.
Bill Gates, and also his main rival, what's his name? Rafael Nadal. He's basically injured, I'm not saying it was the thingy injury, but he's a year or two older. But Bill Gates was actually at the final where Djokovic won.
Sucker. Sadly, this week, someone has passed. Fred Lamarmotte died suddenly in Quebec, Canada. Was
he vaccinated?
Well, I don't know about that now. I'm not sure. No one's saying it. They're just saying he died suddenly, which makes you wonder. It's suspicious, right? Sudden death of Quebec's Fred Lamarmotte cast a shadow. Oh, very good wordplay on Groundhog Day. Didn't know the Canadians did Groundhog Day too, but there you go. So they went to, open his little den, and he's supposed to, they hold him up and they listen to what he says. And if he sees a shadow, 6 more weeks of winter or not. But what happens if you take him out and Fred's dead? Are you in for an endless winter? This winter is never going to end.
You have to try and wake him up. Fred, wake up. Bonk him. Maybe, was he frozen? Is that what it was? He was just frozen solid?
They just said die suddenly.
Well,
it's suspicious now. I'm worried. I'm wondering if he did get the thing. These days you can't be sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, weather's a complicated thing, Neil, and you shouldn't confuse weather with climate. If you ever try and talk about the weather or climate change or anything on any social media, if you wait long enough, some snobby climatologist or will come in and tell you, I think you're confusing climate and weather, Neil. You don't know the very basic difference between climate and weather. You need to look it up, okay? It's, so just shut up. And also, are you a doctor? Are you an epidemiologist? Are you a virologist? If not, just shut up. You can't comment on any of this stuff, okay? Unless you have PhDs in every single...
I'm a fisherman.
You're a fisherman, right? And you're going to slap people with that fish. Good job.
You want to talk about climate?
No.
There is no global warming.
Shut up.
I'm citing official data here. I think
super
the
hot
latest
last
was
year.
just released.
It was super hot where I lived last year. Therefore, there is global warming.
Remember the pause to explain that there had been no warming in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, they said, well, there's a pause, but the overall trend's still going up.
Yeah.
That's just been officially extended. It's now 8 years and 5 months and counting since September 2014. Officially, the overall global figure they give is that we are 0.16 C down.
Yeah, but that's overall. That's just a pause in the overall trend, Neil. And you see whenever
This way.
Yeah, but do you see when it goes, when we actually go into an ice age? That's still just
Global warming
dip in the overall warming trend, right? I mean, don't be so like subjective about it, you know. Just because in the northern hemisphere
when we hit
you're all freezing, don't think that this isn't global warming, because that freeze, that mini ice age, will be temporary, and the people after you will have to suffer when the heat overall trend continues up. When it rebounds back into heat, the sea levels will still rise after that. In fact, look at it this way. If there's a major freeze in the northern hemisphere, the ice caps increase. When they melt again, what'll happen? Major sea level rise. What's that? Global warming.
Exactly. Man-made. And I'll be banned from social media in 150 years.
And if those expanded ice caps for a few thousand years when they cause glaciation in the northern hemisphere, when they are melted, possibly as a result of a meteorite strike that releases large amounts of water from the frozen ice caps back into the oceans, and then causes the sea level rise that has been predicted, Neil, as part of global warming, that's still man-made.
How? What?
Because when people go mental on the planet, it calls down space rocks. So they're making it. It is man-made.
I see. And when all that happens, you'll still be telling me, listen, Neil, don't mind the mile-high ice in New York City. Don't confuse weather and climate.
Right. Don't confuse weather and climate. Just look at it in a long, just
if only we had those Chinese weather balloons to warn us.
if you feel you're being proven wrong, if you feel that you're wrong about global warming, man-made global warming, just expand out the time frame. A few thousand years. And look at the really, really long-term overall trends. Go way, way out. You can imagine if you keep going to that point in a few billion years where the sun is going to burn up the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty hot, huh?
The long enough time scale, the media is always right.
Exactly. A long enough time scale, I can justify anything. So there you go. So I think we'll leave it there for this week, folks. At least I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to, if Neil isn't going to leave it there, I'm going to get up and leave him here, and he can talk about whatever he wants. But I have to go because I have very important things to do. Like scan the skies outside my house for Chinese spy balloons, sorry. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. We hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for commenting and chatting. And don't forget to smash all the like buttons, because smashing buttons is really... well, it'll release a bit of stress that I'm sure you're feeling these days. So, we'll be back next week with another show on whatever's been happening between now and then. So, until then, have a good one. See you later.
See you next week. Bye, everyone.
Can't stop the signal, Mal.